So, hey everybody, if you remember my Superman 2, the Richard Donner cut review from a while back, today I'm talking about basically the alternative version of that, which most people saw even before the Donner version was released, and that is the original cut of Superman 2. So, I know most people probably did it in opposite order where they reviewed this version first and then the Donner version. But strangely enough for me, I saw the Donner version before watching this version. So today I'm reviewing the original cut. This one was shown in theaters back in the early 80s, and this is the version I'm going to review for you today since I didn't review this version yet. So, in Superman 2, since I did review this one in another form in the past, I'll try to be a little bit briefer with the synopsis since this is basically my second time reviewing basically just a different version of Superman 2. Basically, General Zod, who we saw in the first film, is frozen in this cube as punishment on Krypton, and it's several years later. Basically the events of Superman 1 happen, and he gets unfrozen by a different event than the Donner version, and he awakens and flies in the Earth, and that's how he eventually encounters Superman. He's doesn't really know a lot about humans. He's so used to the Kryptonian lifestyle that when he sees people on Mars, and he thinks when they're talking to Houston, Texas, he thinks that the planet's called Planet Houston, and a lot of stuff that happened in the Donner version that Richard Donner kept for his version as well. Um, the opening of this film is very different. You can definitely tell Richard Lester, who directed this version of Superman 2, had to reshoot a lot of stuff just because it wasn't his footage from Superman 1. But strangely enough, though, he was able to use some of Richard Donner's footage from the original Superman movie. So I thought that was a little weird how he wasn't able to use certain stuff, but he was able to use all this footage from the original movie for the opening credits. My guess is because they couldn't afford Marlon Brando for Superman 2, and basically any scene that had Marlon Brando in it, they couldn't use pretty much. And when you watch the Richard Lester version of Superman 2, it's pretty obvious that they didn't have the budget for Marlon Brando simply because there's not a single scene in the movie where you see Jor-El. There's obviously scenes where it's hinting toward the fact that, that Clark Kent might be talking to Jor-El in the ice cave and things of that nature, but we never see Jor-El in the movie for the simple reason that, Richard Lester was hired over Richard Donner at one point during Superman 2 in production to basically make a Superman 2 that didn't require Marlon Brando simply because they couldn't afford Marlon Brando. Um, so back to the synopsis of the movie. Basically, Zod, is on Earth. He's trying to take over the planet. He thinks that because him and his minions are much more dominant than the people of Earth. They try to take it over. They take over the White House and things of that nature. And then there's a smaller subplot in the movie where Clark Kent thinks he's ready to date Lois Lane, and try to live a life with her. Um, so in this version, his mother takes away his power from it, so he can become Clark Kent and nothing more than that. But when he realizes that basically Clark Kent exists to be Superman and protect the Earth, that's when he realizes that he really needs to be Superman throughout the rest of his life, and that Clark Kent is just basically his alter ego to who he really is. So that being said, he has to fight Zod eventually, who's trying to take over the planet. So that's basically the same synopsis I gave for the Donner version, but I probably went to a little bit more detail with that version. So for the original cut of Superman 2, you guys, I still think it's a great story. This is my positives. It's still the great story's intact. You can definitely tell that a lot of Donner's footage was intact for this one, at least for the most part. It's a little bit of a backstab to him because they used the footage that he worked on and filmed and things of that nature. But there was obviously some scenes in here that Richard Lester filmed himself. And after seeing both versions, it was quite clear on certain scenes that, okay, that was a Lester version and that was what Donner did in his version. I still think that Christopher Reeve and Margot Kidder had great chemistry in this, just like they did in the Donner version. It's just still that same great chemistry that you remember if you were like me and watched the Donner version before this one, simply because I knew Richard Donner did the first movie, so I wanted to see basically his take on Superman 2 since I'm a fan of directors coming back for the sequels. I think that's what really drew me to the Donner version over this one first for viewing. In this version, you see Superman basically putting American flag on the top of the White House, and basically because Zod took it over and destroyed it, destroyed what he could of it, And so I kind of liked that scene near the end. I almost wish Donner kept that in his version where he's putting that American flag back in the White House. I think it just represents that, Superman's this all American hero. He's here for the people. He has to be Superman to protect the Earth. That's why, Jor-El and his mother had such faith in him and bringing him to Earth. And, um, it just for me it just really represented what Superman was all about specifically for that time period. He was this all-American hero for the DC comic universe, just like how Captain America is for the Marvel universe. So I really wish that flag scene would have kept in there for the Donner version, because if it did, and then the Donner version really been perfected. But it was Donner's call, and I think for the most part that was probably something Richard Lester added into his version. So anything that was from Lester, I'm sure Donner put as a minimum in his version. After seeing this version of Superman 2, I think it's officially clear that General Zod is a much better villain than Lex Luthor in general. There's been two versions of Superman 2 now. Man of Steel used General Zod again, and I think he's the second most used villain next to Lex Luthor when it comes to Superman movies. And I think it's just quite clear that General Zod is just a better villain than Lex Luthor. He can be a physical threat to Superman. He can actually fight Superman without having to worry about technology and tricking people and things of that nature. I don't know, but Lex Luthor is just like, he's just this business dude that has all this technology and knowledge and all that other crap lying around, and he just so happens to use it against Superman. He just so happens to know that kryptonite is something that Superman can fight against. And I don't know, for me, General Zod is just a better example of a better villain specifically for the Superman universe. One thing that this version of Superman 2 explored that I almost wish Donner kept for his version was that the disadvantage about Lois Lane knowing about Clark Kent's secret identity. The film, it's a very brief scene. It happens before that hokey, Superman kissing Lois Lane, so she forgets about him being Superman kind of thing. But which, thank God, Donner didn't keep. I thought that was a really cheesy scene in this movie. But I liked that idea of, Lois realizes why Clark did this to her, why he, kept this a secret, why she couldn't know about it, why, she would already rat him out simply because she's a journalist and things of that nature about being Superman. And I just like how, you really saw this kind of stress put upon her by knowing that he was Superman. She didn't know to call him Clark or to call him Superman or to call him Kal-El, or and she didn't know how to approach him or see or do when she saw him around the office at the Daily Planet and things of that nature. So I really liked how Lester actually explored that disadvantage Lois Lane would have by knowing that Clark Kent is Superman. So that's one version that's one scene in his version that I think really almost stood out to me, just because it's such a powerful scene, and it really just shows how deeply impacted she got by figuring out this secret about Clark Kent. So, for the negatives, you guys, I do think Donner's version is the overall better version. It's executed better, it's written better. His pacing, I thought, was a little better than this version. I liked that, in his version, Lois Lane found out about Clark Kent being Superman in a more interesting fashion, a much more realistic fashion. And this one, they do it more so with like this cheesy river scene thing. And I even thought the opening scenes of the Donner version were better. The opening credits, and kind of, with that one too, Lois Lane is a little bit more, she's a little bit more after Clark Kent. She really thinks that he's Superman, and that one I think handles it a little bit better as far as Lois Lane really trying to find out if Clark Kent is Superman. This one, they do play off that a little bit. It's not as big as the Donner version. Um, how they find out, how she finds out about Clark Kent being Superman, I think is a little bit cheesier in this version also. So I just think Donner just had a better eye and a better taste as far as how to execute this story. This is my personal opinion, though. There's some really lame jokes in this version, specifically in the stuff that Lester shot and that Donner didn't keep in his version. There's a lot of like orange juice jokes and things. Just like, why would he want to do that in this version? So I can see why Donner really hates this version, and I can see why it was taken out of his version, just because those lame jokes about the orange juice are just really, really get old after a while. I really wish they didn't do it. I thought the opening credits in this was pretty mediocre for the most part, and it was really long too. It was just like, basically they could have just put the whole first Superman in the opening credits, because they just show all these scenes and all these scenes and all these scenes, and we occasionally see like the opening credit, oh, Christopher Reeve's in the movie, and oh, Margot Kidder's in the movie, and things like that. And it just felt really long. It almost took like 10 minutes out of the movie just to do that. And um, I just liked how Richard Donner kept to that traditional logos and words flying in his version for when he did the Donner version. And I just think Donner has an overall better taste than Lester did as far as how to make a Superman movie. Some scenes go on longer than they should. That's just once again a pacing issue. Just I really think Donner had a much better eye as far as that's a good pacing. That's too slow. That's too quick. That's not enough time there. There's not there's too much time spent on this and things of that nature. And I think this version of Superman 2 is just further proof that we need Jor-El in the story. There's a reason why Richard Donner brought Jor-El's footage back. I know DC and Warner Brothers couldn't afford Marlon Brando to be in the movie back when this was first filmed, but that was just further proof of seeing in the Donner version that Marlon Brando's scenes just were just so powerful, and they were just such a key part of the story. And it was just so stupid that Lester had to go off screen just to get him out of the story. And it was just further proof that Marlon Brando Jor-El character was just such a huge part of Superman 2, and without him, Superman 2 just doesn't feel right without him. Um, and another note too, I just thought Lester's scenes that were exclusive to his version. There was a scene dealing with the terrorists, or a group of terrorists in this tower with Lois Lane on the bottom of this elevator, that just really didn't work. I just really wanted them to get to the next point of the movie. I don't even think General Zod was introduced yet. Like, we saw like the brief part of him at the beginning, but as far as like him interacting with things on Earth at that point, he wasn't even in the story at that point. And I just thought, once again, Lester just didn't know how to make a Superman movie as well as Richard Donner did. And after seeing the Donner version of Superman 2, once again, I just think Donner has a better eye for how to make a Superman movie. So for the original cut of Superman 2, guys, I do give it an 8 out of 10. Like I said, it's still a good movie. It's a good Superman movie. It's a good Superman sequel. It's just the Donner version is just so much superior in so many ways. Like I said, the pacing's better. The overall, like, these scenes should be used instead. That aspect and those choices I thought were better. And just, I liked how they tried to make a darker Superman movie with the Donner version, and this one doesn't really try to do that. So if you're going to watch Superman 2, I'd recommend the Donner version. This version's still good. Like I said, just if it were me, I would definitely choose the Donner version over this one. This one just is just not as good as what Richard Donner gave us in his version of Superman 2.